Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, your move, Chicago. It's your time to shine. What are you going to be able to get back in a trade this big? Because even though the player that you might be dealing is on the smaller side, this trade idea is definitely one of the bigger ones regardless. So, let's talk today about Alex DeBrincat, one of the more underrated goal scorers in the NHL, especially for the guys in the U25 range. Because when it comes to Frank Seravalli's recent list on dailyfaceoff.com, we had ourselves an update on Alex DeBrincat and his entire situation with Chicago. Now, just for a little bit of a refresher, DeBrincat, 24 years old, 5'7", 165 is a right-handed shot. He's a guy who can play all forward positions, and he's making $6.4 million a season till the end of 2023. He's got no trade protection, which is pretty good for anybody that's going out there and saying that this guy should be traded. And he's coming off a 78-point year where he had 41 goals in 82 games. This is the second as such year he has had, as in 2018-19, he had a similar amount of points, 76 this time, and the same amount of goals in the same amount of games. So, DeBrincat is legitimately a stud, and he had 32 goals in 52 games last year, which would have been on pace for, 32 divvy 52 multiplied out by 82, that would have been on pace for 50. So he is a 40, 45-ish goal scorer at his best, and he's playing on a Chicago Blackhawks team that has been very well documented by everybody in the media as to wanting to potentially sell off some assets by the time this offseason rolls around. Which is why, for Frank Seravalli's Daily Faceoff trade targets list from June 9th, 2022, Chicago's Alex DeBrincat is the number one player available ahead of a wild NHL offseason. Link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read the article. The Canucks center JT Miller and New Jersey Devils second overall pick are also in play. If you go over to the write-up here for DeBrincat, who is number one on the current trade targets list, this is what it says. The scoop is, the question seems to be when and not if the Hawks will move the two-time 40-goal scorer. Is it this summer or before next season's trade deadline? If it seems odd that the rebuilding Blackhawks would want to move a sniper just hitting his prime with more goals than Nathan MacKinnon and Brad Marchand over the last 4 seasons, what a run-on sentence, eh? Consider these 3 points. 1. DeBrincat is Chicago's best trade chip to begin stockpiling future assets. 2. By the time Chicago gets to where it wants, he will be a middle-aged player by NHL standards. And 3, with a $9 million qualifying offer due at the end of next season, his contract expires in 2023, they would need to pay him big to keep him on what would be a struggling squad. And so, with all of the timeline features and with the needs and wants of the Blackhawks at the moment, it does make a lot more sense to say that Alex DeBrincat should be a trade target. In fact, here's an update that we had also on Twitter from the Daily Faceoff show the next day, so June 10th. Seravalli doubled down and he said this: it might be this summer or at the trade deadline next year, but it is happening. I can very confidently say that. So now, going back to what Seravalli said on the article, it's when, not if now, right? This is a guy that is going to get traded, it's just a matter of where to and when it's going to happen. And when I think about the possibilities, I start to think about other teams that have been in the market for top-tier forwards and RFAs and all that and say, is Alex DeBrincat a guy that could interest them too? And when I think about it, I think about Kevin Fiala, I think about JT Miller, I think about free agents like Phil Kessel and some other players that are out there. Why the heck wouldn't every NHL team actually be involved in this kind of thing? Because, as we noted, Alex DeBrincat is 24 freaking years old, and he's got 2 seasons of 40 goals under his belt. He could have had a 50-goal season if he sustained his pace from last year over a full 82-game sample. He's really good. And it's kind of wild just taking a look at how everything has transcended for DeBrincat after being a second-round pick in the 2016 NHL Draft. If you didn't remember why it was that he went so late, despite the fact that he had 100 points in the OHL, firstly, you could say that his production early on in his career was kind of boosted by guys like Dylan Strome and Connor McDavid, who were also on the Otters at that time, and then the season after, there were just a lot of people knocking on his skating. He wasn't really the fastest guy, he wasn't really the most agile guy. He had talent, for sure. He played with Dylan Strome, and he had 100 points. But he was not seen as that guaranteed guy to be an absolute stud at the NHL level because of his speed and his agility and his mobility and all that stuff. So he was a second-round pick by Chicago, plus the fact that he's only 5'7". That helps too. But shortly after getting drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, it became clear that all the teams that passed up on this guy in the first round kind of made a mistake, because in his first season he had 52 points in 82 games. The next season after that he had his first 40-goal year. Now, Alex DeBrincat is in pretty good territory when it comes to projecting his long-term future, financially speaking. He's made about $12 million so far, and as we said, his contract expires next season, wherein he will get a massive payday as a 25-year-old who, if all things go right, could probably be coming off of 2 straight 40-goal years, assuming he gets that mark again in 2022-2023. But when I think about these teams, going back to the previous thought, that were involved in other conversations for forwards, I say, okay, the Ottawa Senators might be in there, the New Jersey Devils might be in there too. It would be really interesting seeing what some of these teams could muster up, especially since they're already in the market for expending their first-round picks that are top 10 picks this year. Should Chicago go out of their way and take a look at those draft picks, or should they try to pry away some other assets as well? Who really knows? Frank Seravalli said when, not if, right? So maybe the Blackhawks decide to stand pat. Maybe they say, okay, we could keep DeBrincat on our team for the start of 22-23. He can score maybe 20 goals in half the season, and then we can trade him at the trade deadline for any team that's going to go out there and pay the price. We also had ourselves this article, Hawks are gauging interest in DeBrincat, from June 10th, 2022, published by David Pagnotta on the fourth period. Here are the teams that are on the scope right here. It's the Devils. Hey, there you go. We just kind of had that conversation. The Kings, the Islanders, and the Flyers are apparently interested in this player as well. If the second overall pick is in play for New Jersey, hey, LA, Philly, you guys might have to go out there and step up your game. But when it comes to the LA Kings, they are an interesting team too, because when I think about goal scoring on the LA Kings, yes, you could say they do have somewhat of a lack of it. They have some good players that I think will be good goal scorers by the time they hit their primes. Arthur Kaliev, Quinton Byfield, of course. But for a team that was barely edged out by the Edmonton Oilers in Game 7 of the first round this year, goal scoring was a big concern, so you could definitely say that DeBrincat should be on their crosshairs. And besides, the Kings do have the amount of capital in terms of prospects that I think the Blackhawks could be interested in, so that's definitely a connection that makes sense in my mind. You talk about the Philadelphia Flyers. This is a team that a lot of people have been questioning their direction over the past little while here. They didn't get the best out of Ryan Ellis. The guy didn't play because he was injured, and now you take a look at the Owen Tippetts of the world, the other draft picks you got for Claude Giroux. There is some level of youthful exuberance that the Flyers do have, and they could for sure benefit from the services of an Alex DeBrincat as well. It's just, I don't necessarily know if they'll be able to get it done. I don't really know if I trust Chuck Fletcher and the crew to make a trade that would actually benefit their team and not have everybody pissed off as they were with all the other trades the guys made. And then you have the New York Islanders, a team coming off of a Barry Trotz system that was so defensively oriented that they kind of need goal-scoring support as well. Now, for the Isles, they have Lane Lambert at the helm now. He's no longer an assistant, he is the main dude, and in subsequent games throughout the season last year where Barry Trotz was out and Lambert was the head coach instead, they actually did perform pretty well. They had a little bit more of a finer-tuned offensive system, and it was very noticeable to a lot of Islanders fans. So when it comes to adding a DeBrincat on top of going with that system full-time, I think the Islanders could make a very big turnaround, especially if you decide to play DeBrincat with Matthew Barzal. Imagine having 2 goal scorers of the 30-goal caliber in Anders Lee and DeBrincat at the same time. Reminds me of the Tavares days. Maybe you get back to the Eastern Conference Finals after missing out of the playoffs entirely this season, but of course that might be a shot in the moon comparative to where you were in 2022. But talk to me in the comments either way all your thoughts about Alex DeBrincat and his profile as a player. He's a small guy, he's a goal-scorer guy, he might be on the trade block kind of guy. And if you're a fan of the Kings, the Devils, or the Flyers, I guess you could say the Sens as well, because we did throw that name in this conversation before looking at the article. Talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about whether or not you want your team to acquire Alex DeBrincat, and if so, what is the trade return you would be comfortable in giving up? If you're a Blackhawks fan, then hey, let me know as well, what from these teams would you want in an Alex DeBrincat trade? Do you want that second overall pick more than anything? Or do you want, let's say, one of the prospects from the LA system more? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.